Today we are speaking at a conference. I consider it one of the worst conferences in the history of humanity, or a unique conference. In fact, there is no conference like this that is repeated in the events of history. The Berlin Conference was held in the year 884. This conference was held with the aim of organizing the colonization of Africa, so that what happens between the colonists is a conflict. May has also been a European dollar that wants to take over Africa. There will be no conflict between them on African land or on European land as a result of competition for ownership of the lands of the African continent. A human thing, of course, a group. I mean, if you give it an example of the contemporary reality we live in is like a group of thieves sitting together. They will steal a lot of prestige and start laying down some foundations that we do not fight with each other after we take it that it has started. We are putting in place certain controls that allow us to deal peacefully between ourselves and each other when we are cheek and control this huge wealth that we are going to steal. This is what happened. I mean, this is the reality of the matter. We are actually trying to beautify it in different ways, political and diplomatic. They are laying down some humanitarian frameworks, enriching them. We are going to create a civilization in Africa. We start with some good ways of life and beautiful, but of course the reality of the branches is stealing from this great continent that it did not have. No link? Before this conference, about 10% of Africa was occupied by Europe. Approximately 10%, meaning this conference was in the year 1884. If we talk that until, for example, the 70s of this century, the occupations were limited, in which some colonies of my own were Portugal present in the south, in Mozambique, in Guinea-Bissau, and some places. What was what? Algeria is occupied by France, and France, which also had some other uses in Gabon or in Janbia. England was the occupier of some places. It had not yet occupied Egypt. Rather, it was the occupier of some limited places in South Africa, in the Cape in South Africa. Of course, it was also Stable and Melilla, the two cities from Morocco occupied by Spain. Unfortunately, of course, they are still confused until now. I mean, the matter developed in the 60s of the 19th century. In 1865, King Leopold II assumed the throne of Belgium. This king had, before he took over the king, he had ambitions in Africa. I mean, he possessed a strong urge for dominance. The Congo River Basin region specifically, and he used to say that it had great wealth of rubber trees from which very many industries could be made, and therefore he had a desire for this issue, but he was always confronted with economic problems within his country, and the expenditure on such campaigns to control places deep in Africa might be difficult and burdensome to the state, but he was so enthusiastic about the matter that in 1876 he took over 1865. After his term of office for 11 years, he held a large conference that brought together famous international geographers. At that time, the discovery of Africa was one of the most exciting things for geographers because it was many unknown places. He gathered all the geographers and told them about his ambitions, heard from them, and learned more details about Africa. After the conference, he contacted one of the great English explorers named Stanley, whose origin the English government had rejected, who supported his projects because they were also very expensive economically. Stanley devoted all his efforts to the second king, and the two dragons together did research, did studies, and made trips. They ended up forming the so-called International Friendly Congo Committee, a need to manage events within the Universe River. The world began to hear. In the Congo River, there may be a nucleus of wealth, even if there is a body that has been formed, and the body is headed by the second king, and therefore there is a possibility that Belgium will enter the race for the lands inside the Congo. These words aroused the ire of France. Because France has property, as we said a while ago, in Janbia and Gabon is nearby. Who too attended Caen, and thus began, when King Leopold began to expand in the region, and France also began to fear for its property, the two races agreed with each other. They made an agreement in the year 80,000. They made an agreement with each other if they did not exceed the limits of some agreement that occurred between the two races. The ruins of Portugal's fury, because Portugal also had a role in discovering the mouth of the Congo River on the ocean. Therefore, the Orange said that I am the one entitled to this region from Belgium and France. But Portugal was financially weak at the time. It had very major economic crisis, so it began to support England. England, of course, has dealt in history with the utmost breadth. England wants to take the region, but who? Through Portugal, it supported Portugal and actually said that Portugal was entitled to take this region, hoping that when Portugal took it, England would know how to take it from Portugal with this agreement. An agreement with Portugal in February 1884, prioritizing Portugal's Congo River rights over France and Belgium. If we take into account that we are now speaking in 1884, in the beginning it was actually England which occupied Egypt in the year 82, and France occupied Tunisia in the year 1881. So European properties in Africa began to expand relatively, and this speech aroused the major powers present in Europe in general. Signs of conflicts began to appear in France when the issue took this form. It is now England and with it Portugal. She began to fear that she was not originally at odds with Belgium and that they were making an agreement with each other so that they would not cross the borders as their boundaries were adjacent. She said that this is possible for the issue to develop verbally and there would be no opportunity for France if it controlled large areas inside Africa. So she approached Germany. Germany was outside the issue. Bismarck was leading Germany at that time. As always, she was high on the issue of Africa and saw that spending money was in. Controlling colonies in Africa may be costly for the German economy and it is impossible to achieve the necessary benefits, but when Germany saw that all countries were workers struggling over Africa, it waxed on us. Well, we also did not have a desire to take anything in Africa, so they agreed with France. If the two of them together are holding a large conference calling on all countries, the European ones called for it, but Bismarck himself and the European countries responded. She said, by God, I mean us. We sit together and deal with this issue of Africa. How can we take Africa without fighting with each other? They held a large conference called for Lay but Mark, and the European countries responded. 14 countries attended this conference from November 15, 1984 to February 26, 1985. This means a conference that lasted for 3 months and a little, and this conference took place in which 10 sessions were held. Countries attended this conference, as we said, 14 countries attended. Germany attended. Naturally, the convener of the conference, Austria and Hungary, attended, and this is as one country. One country called Austria and Hungary were united with each other. Swiss was one country D with one name, meaning Sweden and Norway. This is Spain, Portugal, England, France, Russia, Italy, the Netherlands, and the Ottoman Empire. The state of the major countries that existed in Europe at that time, or countries that had fleets, navy, means that it has an opportunity, if it is possible, to operate a colony within Africa. And America's presence also invited America, and America attended, as if it were present as an observer of events that were not there. Directly, this is the conference in which they will divide Africa, ha ha ha. There is no African in your presence, ha ha ha, nor a king, nor a head of a tribe, nor a head of state, nor any border from Africa. They will share with each other in Berlin, etc. The foundations and frameworks by which they work to divide Africa among them without any African having an opinion on the story. They worked out 38 articles at this conference, and the two summaries of these articles. First, freedom of trade in the Congo River and the Niger. So that we still have areas in Africa within which all countries can move, and they created a state called the Congo Free State, over which a committee governed by it and a national government under the auspices of the King of Belgium. This is called the Congo State, Al-Hura. Of course, this is all superficial talk. After that, neither free nor anything else. After that, the King of Belgium took it all, as we will see a little later. What did he do? Decision, or is it the most important substance in the world? This topic is called the actual occupation material. Effective occupation means actual occupation. They said that for a country to enter Africa, to occupy a country in Africa or a place in Africa, certain conditions are necessary. The first condition is that I know all the things. The countries participating in the 14 Nation Conference are. If I go to this place and these countries agree that he takes this place from Africa, this is one number. Numra Etnin must support this statement by those who say it is an actual occupation of the country. I mean, he will send his army and be in control of this region, and the other countries will know that I have taken control of this region. Do you agree or not? We agree. That's it. My ransom, that's it. Right in his name. No one demands it. After that, from European countries. They landed in the coastal areas only, and at this conference they invented the word hinterland, which they called hunterland, hunterland D or hinterland. What does it mean? It means that if you control a coastal area, you can expand as much as you want inland. Of course, this will create the future. It means problems between European countries on the borders, because you took, for example, the region of Nigeria is expanding internally. If someone takes a region next to you, Sierra Leone, for example, is expanding internally, it is possible that in the end it will be pious with you at one point, so there will remain future conflicts in it, but they were not. They are looking inward with great and strong interest at this stage, on the basis that the coasts are the ones that are easy to control, and the coasts of Africa are very, very wide. You are in control of this. All of this takes dozens of years on the calculations of the time. Regarding LD or interior land issues, they kept opportunities open, securing the coast, claiming internal areas as possible, no resistance, enacting laws. And after the conference ended in 1985, the European countries began the process of the rest of the voracious acceleration towards Africa, which they called the rush to Africa or the race towards Africa.
The powerful European fleets began to move, and glory be to God, we are talking about the year 1585, the year 1902, and 2 years, meaning 17 years after the conference, 92% of Africa was occupied. 92% were saying the year 85, 10%, meaning they occupied more than 10% of the state, which brought them to 92, 82% increase.
In the occupation, Fidel did not occupy more than 8%, but it was not occupied, which were the countries of Morocco, Libya, Liberia, and Ethiopia only, and after a while they also occupied them. I am talking until 1,900 TU, that is in 1906, were occupied by Morocco. In 1911, they occupied Libya, and in 1936, they occupied Ethiopia and Liberia, but they were the ones who occupied it. But it was under American protection. It was not occupied militarily, but its entire economy and its entire politics were directed towards America in that reality. With this conference, after these races from Europe, the occupation of Africa, Africa was divided thus between 7 countries. 7 countries became in control of all of Africa. The lion's share was from the 2 largest and 2 most powerful countries in Europe, France and England. France was the highest percentage of proportions, the countries that occupied in A. In Africa, I got 33, 100.8. Africa followed. Most of France's occupations in the West are in Western and Northwestern Africa, not complete. Senegal, Mauritania, Niger, Mali. In addition, all the countries that are located in the West and Northwest of some places in the East, such as French Somalia, even from Somalia, and the same as Gaskar in the East, but most of France's bloc is in the West, and this is what explains to us now the relationship of this West African country with France and Ghana, I mean all of these countries. Britain also took 32.8% of the hill, meaning Africa for France followed by Africa for England, but England was concentrated in the east. It took Egypt for Sudan, Uganda, Kenya, all the regions that are in the east, in addition to South Africa, which uses the Cape below. And it also took, in the west, there are some needs, such as Nigeria and Sierra Leone. Belgium took 8%, mainly Congo. This is the occupation of Belgium, 8%. Germany also took 8%. Cameroon, Tanzania, areas in Southwest Africa, in addition to Rwanda and Burundi, and small countries located in the east of the continent. Portugal was 7%. Approximately 106.9%. 7% rich pesos. Angola, Mozambique, Italy is expensive. 5% A. Libya, Eritrea, and parts of Somalia. Spain, the least of them in the occupation, 0.7%, meaning less than 1% of all of them, which is the Moroccan desert and rural areas in Morocco, in addition to Equatorial Guinea, remains the date of Africa. 17 years after the Berlin Conference, most of Africa was occupied and the rest was on its way to occupation. This is how Africa was stolen with all its remaining wealth in gold, silver, diamonds, uranium, agricultural crops, minerals, geographical locations, be with tourism by anything, and it occupied and shaped its policy for consecutive decades for more than 100 years, and Africa is still suffering from this issue, the limits of the border problems that exist as a result of this situation that existed between each two countries, because it was not taken into account. Occupation imposed social controls, delineating French and English territorial boundaries within tribes. China is written here in 1.5 countries according to the type of occupation and all the wealth taken and plundered over the decades and sold. And what is better after the occupations, the distance, the occupation that ended, the declaration, the independence in the 60s and 70s, we compare the 20. All this wealth remained tied up in companies from the countries that occupied it. Of course, what does it mean that the African country is still suffering from the effects of this terrible conference, of course? We do not blame only the thieves who stole this money and this wealth in this way. Kamea, which does not exist at all in history in this situation, in a world that gathers together to occupy the second continent and organize it together, how do we occupy it? An entire continent is like this with all its countries, but we also blame the Africans who are outside the picture. It's okay if their country was divided in this way and they do not have the capabilities or ability. They push themselves away, preserve their rights, or compensated for the gap between them and the occupier, who came with large machines and a great dimension, of course. We bear the blame. For those unable to safeguard their rights, be proactive in managing your affairs thoroughly. We ask God Almighty for acceptance and reward, and may God's peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you.